Here is a quick guide for my Poison Imbue rogue in Diablo 4. Please remember, I have a link to the full build in the description below. First, let's talk about the skills. The basic attack is Puncture with Fundamental Puncture. It applies Vulnerable, which is essential for maximizing damage output in this game, and since we use combo points, your targets should always be vulnerable. For core skills, max Twisting Blades and spec into Advanced Twisting Blades for the cooldown reduction. Picking up Sturdy and Siphoning Strikes provides some defense and healing. In Agility, Shadow Step is mandatory, as it is the best unstoppable ability for rogues currently. I prefer Methodical Shadow Step for the on-demand crowd control, but there is merit to Disciplined Shadow Step for a shorter cooldown. I skip the point in dash and get the skill points from my boots. Concussive and Trick attacks are both one-point wonders that provide a ton of crowd control and provide additional critical strike chance. The only thing we care about in Subterfuge is Poison Trap and countering Poison Trap. Imbuements is all about Poison Imbuement with Blended Poison Imbuement. Be sure to pick up 3 points in Debilitating Toxins for 15% damage reduction from poisoned enemies, and 1 point in Deadly Venom and Alchemical Advantage. For ultimate skills, we only go for passives. 3 points go into Innovation and Trap Mastery, with 1 point in Adrenaline Rush and 2 points in Alchemist's Fortune. For key passives, you can choose one of 3. Momentum gives you the most defense. Close Quarters gives you tons of damage, with the 30% damage buff and 20% attack speed. Exposure can be used for more Poison Trap uptime, but I feel like I only really use it on elite mobs, to prevent damage or bait annoying mobs. I've done variations of this build with Shadow Imbue or Death Trap. They work, but it didn't feel as good to me. I've also tried Shadow Imbue with Poison Imbue, but dropping dash made me feel sad. Besides, the harder the content gets, the worse Shadow Imbue feels. It's a shame since it's such a satisfying ability. My Paragon boards are still kind of messy. I'm still learning which glyphs and rare nodes feel worth it. There is room on my board selection for more damage or defense as needed. So far, this seems to be a good balance of damage and defense. The glyphs I chose to use are Closer. I place this glyph on the starting board. Although damage to close enemies is additive, the 66% I get from using this glyph on this board seems to fit right. It's an easy board to get the dexterity requirement for the 10% damage reduction bonus. Transitioning into the next board, I picked No Witness and rotated it, leaving the glyph socket on the right side of the board. Exploit. There really isn't much more to say about this glyph any endgame Diablo 4 player doesn't already know. Vulnerable damage is multiplicative, this glyph is a huge damage boost, and the No Witness board is fantastic for exploit. The path I chose provides tons of strength nodes, a rare node for 30% damage increase, and an 8% increase to our base maximum life. Transitioning into the next board, I picked Cheap Shot, and rotated it with the legendary node in the topmost position, Tracker. This is the glyph I will be testing against Bane. The additional damage to poisoned targets is nice, but if the proc chance is good enough, Bane will pull ahead. I'm actually almost certain it will. If you choose to run Bane instead of Tracker, just reverse the point allocation in that section of the board. Don't feel bad about losing Devious, as it is an additive damage increase, and it has a conditional requirement. Head north and we get the Cheap Shot legendary node, Safeguard for some defense and Oppress for more damage to crowd-controlled mobs. Transitioning into the next board, I picked Tricks of the Trade and rotated it so that the glyph socket is to the left of center and the legendary node is to the right of center. Combat. This glyph is pretty powerful. After you meet the requirements, your skills that crit will restore 12% of their energy cost. Since we are critting all the time, we are always getting that refund. We path up to the glyph socket on the left side, picking up Bralwa for more damage to close enemies, with some optional nodes for close damage reduction. Armor for Lawless is nice, and the extra damage to elites from Focused helps us burst them down. Havoc is also a nice boost to crit damage. Transitioning into the next board, I chose Deadly Ambush, rotating the board with the glyph closest to the board I'm coming from. Efficacy. This glyph boosts our imbuement damage and grants a 125% bonus to the 2 rare nodes we get on the board. This is a great board for more trap synergy, providing us with many conditional bonuses. Enemies affected by our traps would take more damage, deal less damage, and the Deadly Ambush legendary node gives us more critical strike damage to enemies affected by our traps. These conditional bonuses last for a while because Poison Trap lasts for 9 seconds. The tooltip does not reflect tracker 33% increased duration. I'm not 100% sure if this is the case. Turf. I had plenty of extra Paragon points to play with, so I pathed from the cheap shot board to the right because it was the shortest path to get to another board. I chose Eldritch Bounty with the glyph socket rotated closest to my previous board. Using this board is somewhat experimental for me. I wanted to get additional imbuement damage, non-physical damage increase and imbuement skill cooldown reduction. I will be testing other board setups and heavier point investment into other boards, but I can appreciate the extra close enemy damage reduction and increased damage to close enemies alongside imbuement buffs. For the gear overview, there are some mandatory aspects that make this build work. I understand that there are some other options available that provide more damage potential. However, I chose to build this way to die less. I don't have perfect gear on my rogue. I'm still optimizing. One-handed weapons. Condemnation is mandatory if you wish to use combo points. If you don't have this unique, you can use another one-handed sword with the typical ideal stats. Crit hit damage, vulnerable damage, damage over time, damage to close enemies. You'll want to imprint Edge Master on that weapon and switch to Insight Specialization. Second one-handed weapon, look for the damage stats listed above and imprint with Bursting Venoms. This imprint is mandatory because it allows you to spam Poison Imbuement when it procs. Helm. You will want Poison Imbuement skill points, cooldown reduction, life, and armor percent on your helm imprinted with Disobedience or Might. Chest. Your chest piece should have similar same stats. Ideally, you will want life, armor percent, damage reduction, and damage reduction from close enemies imprinted with Disobedience or Might, depending on what you imprinted on your helm. Gloves. Lucky hit chance to restore primary resource, attack speed, twisting blade skill points, critical strike chance with imbued skills imprinted with corruption. Pants. Implicit 30% barrier when you use a health potion. Life, damage reduction from close enemies, and armor percent imprinted with the protector. This helps you survive instant CC when you first encounter an elite. Boots. Implicit +2 to evade charges. Dash skill points, mandatory. Move speed, energy cost reduction, and damage reduction while injured. Two-handed weapon, crossbow mandatory, vulnerable. Crit hit damage, damage over time, damage to poisoned. Amulet, cooldown reduction, all imbuement skills ranks, armor percent, life and imprint blast trapper. Rings, vulnerable damage, crit chance, crit hit damage, life and imprint 1 ring with umbral, and 1 ring with accelerating. Thanks for watching. Here is some gameplay footage of the build in action.